you knew this question was coming because I would be remiss in not asking this question.
Yes.
What's it like to work with Alan Moore? Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Comics Cube. We are with four-time Eisner Award winner, Gene Ha.
Hey, everybody.
Hi, Gene.
Hi, everybody. Hello, Comics Cube.
I've got to ask, as you were growing up, I know you were a longtime comics fan. What was the moment you realized you wanted to be a comics artist, and who were the comics artists that inspired you?
Kind of going in order. I mean, I was born in 1969, read comics in the 70s, and just really fell in love with the work of artists like Mike Grell. I did not know that he was kind of one of the people in the school of Neil Adams. So I just thought, oh, Mike Grell is the man. And he's still fantastic. But yeah, I had no idea who Neil Adams was. I loved Mike Grell. I also loved Gene Colan, who started off the dark and gritty Daredevil thing a decade before everyone else thought it was cool.
Mm-hmm.
There's an issue of Daredevil where he goes insane, breaks into Avengers Mansion, and because everyone's just trying to calm him down and not hurt him, he ends up taking down like Captain America, Hercules, and the Beast. And then he finally just collapses on the ground and yells, "I'm in pain!" And they have to take him to a hospital. And it's like, I was like, what, 5, 6 years old? And I was like, what the heck was that? But it was amazing, and I needed to read more of it. And then some hack who I'd never heard of took over who couldn't draw in Gene Colan style, named Frank Miller. And I thought, oh, this guy's awful. I'm never going to read his comics. But yeah, just it was just a really interesting time in comics to be a fan. And it was before it was it was close to as gigantic and systematized as it is now.
This actually came up in a recent episode I recorded. How hard do you think it would have been to ink Gene Colan?
Oh, okay. So the thing about being an inker is you have to be, to really be a great inker, you have to be at least as good at drawing as the penciler, and hopefully you're actually better, which is why it's so hard, for instance, to ink, say, Jack Kirby, because you have to have your own interpretation of it, you have to understand his style, and then be able to kind of push beyond it. It's in the same sense that, like, there are hundreds of thousands of people in the comic book industry who can draw better than Gene Ha, but none of them want to draw like Gene Ha because they can already draw better than me. You know, it's that kind of thing.
I'm struggling to understand that, but
to be a great inker, you have to be able to draw better than the penciler, hopefully, and to understand what they're doing and then be able to push it. And Gene Colan had Gene Colan's penciling style was pure pencil. He wanted to do grays and smears and charcoal effects, and then some poor inker got thrown onto him and had to translate all that into crisp black and white. And if you are not really good at inking, or if you're not really good at drawing, not inking, at drawing, you wouldn't be able to translate his stuff into black and white drawings because he wanted grays. He did this great book called Nathaniel Dusk, where it just took his pencil drawings and just printed them directly on the page. And with the technology at the time, and the printing quality of American comics at the time, it just looked awful because they put colors on top of his pencils, which just looked weird.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, that's the problem of being an inker. And I really respect the really great inkers out there. They have to be kind of drawing geniuses and faster than the pencilers, because the pencilers are always late. Oh, go ahead.
No, you cut out a little bit. Can you repeat that last sentence?
Also, inkers have to be faster than pencilers.
Okay.
Because the writer might be a little late, then the penciler's late, and then suddenly all the time that was supposed to be there for inking is eaten up by the penciler and the writer. And then the inker might be a little late, and then like the colorist and the letterer then have their time cut. So everyone who's further down the assembly line has less and less time to get the product finished.
Earlier today, I saw you call Bill Sienkiewicz the greatest Western comics artist of all time.
American comic book artist.
American comics.
So artist. I didn't want to compare him to Mobius, which he might dispute or something like that. But as far as Americans go, I think he is definitely the greatest American comic book artist.
Did you look
And I
up?
didn't also get Asian.
Did you look up to any Asian comic book artists as you were growing up?
There weren't a lot. But let me see. Okay, there were the Filipino ones, and I'm so horrible with names, but I did not have the money. Yeah, and they're really brilliant, but I'm horrible with names. I didn't follow a lot of them when I was a kid, and I didn't even realize. I thought they were like Latino Americans or something like that, because I didn't
Similar
know.
names.
Yeah, similar names. Yeah, because yeah, I mean, like the trade route from the Philippines to Spain during colonial times went through Mexico. So yeah, I mean, the Spaniards were everywhere, and there was all this cultural interchange. But getting back to the main thing, uh, when I didn't realize that there were a lot of Asian artists until I began finding out about that when I did become a fan of Frank Miller and realized he was a genius. Then I found out he was a fan of manga. And I lived in South Bend near Chicago, and Chicago had Japanese bookstores. So I couldn't read any Japanese. My mom's Korean. She couldn't read any Japanese, but she took me there, and I just looked for the prettiest manga I could find. So this was the manga I picked up in high school, um, where I was trying to find something that kind of looked like Frank Miller's work, and I didn't find anything. But this just blew my mind. If I can show you a few pages from it.
Sure.
Okay, so the first one is a strip called Up to Date. So the first page is not too shocking by American standards. It's not something totally unlike what you'd find in an American comic at the time.
Mhm.
Printed a lot better. But you'll see this is raggy because I went through it so often. This double page spread blew my mind. There was nothing like this in American comics I'd ever seen. It's a whole cityscape, I think, of Tokyo.
I see it. I
Incredibly
see the
detailed.
influence on Gene Ha.
Oh yeah, yeah. My mind was just thoroughly blown by that. It was later that I read Akira, but seeing that just blew my mind. Boobies, a little bit of nudity there, cartoony nudity. But that was not, as you probably know, that's not a huge influence on me. I did not do a lot of nudity.
No, you
but
don't
then
do a
also,
lot of that either.
just things like, yeah, very lightweight, teen-focused comic with a little bit of breast nudity, because at the time they had different rules inside of Japan than manga now. But also, look at just this helicopter. I didn't realize that they had this whole system where, for successful manga strip, they would have the main artist, and they'd have backup artists who just focus on backgrounds or just focus on vehicles. But yeah, just seeing stuff like that, it's like, I need to master all of these skills. I need to be able to draw buildings like this guy draws them. And but the biggest shock for me were baseball comics. Oh man, I'm sorry, I'm going to show you this too. I have no idea what this one is. Dr. something, Dr.
I can read it.
Yeah, what's that say?
I mean, if you want me to tell you what it says.
Oh, sure, go ahead. I've never known what the name of that is.
I mean, it's Dr. It's Dr. Typhoon.
Oh, okay. Yeah, he's just this cowboy who goes around and stuff like that, and has, apparently he's maybe, I don't know, he's an oil millionaire or something. But again, just these beautiful cityscapes and stuff like that. Beautiful action scenes. For some reason, he like visits somebody inside of England, I think, and then starts playing polo with the professor. It's a little bit disjointed of just like, I don't know. All these years, I've never met a professor from any country that plays polo. Oh God, this scene. Like
with all the speed lines.
Samurai strip. Yeah, and just also the obsessively careful drawing of the horses and stuff like that. Yeah, just this single book. I never got another manga like this again. I'm sorry. That's just a little funny thing. I swear that it looks like a pub that used to be inside of Chicago, the Red Lion. Anyway, okay, let me show you the strip that really blew my mind. Again, the baseball strip. And I'm going to say, no matter what the genre of the strips in this, there's like probably 8, 9, 10 titles inside of it. The vehicles and backgrounds are always immaculate, almost all of them, except for the cartooniest ones. This baseball strip here, this is the one that really blew my mind. So, I mean, sequences, I mean, it's not that surprising. I mean, it's nicely drawn figure. It's very dynamic. I mean, somebody drawing the in 70s comics would be very proud of that in America. But this is the page. Throwing that baseball. This is something that's still not hidden in hasn't happened in America. That careful distortion. the shape of the round ball. We'd always draw it round. And depending on where it's going, it's this whole science of like what shape the ball distorts as to be. Let me show you. Check out. I still can't quite figure out the science of this, but really, or the technique, or the artistry, the principles for why this is done. But when that ball hits that catcher's mitt, look how the shape distorts again in a totally different way. And if I were trying to draw that, I would distort it in a totally different way. I would actually do it at a right angle to the way they distorted it. So, yeah, just generated this huge respect in me for the obsessiveness of Japanese comics and how they wanted everything perfect. Check it. Okay, this one. This is another one.
Oh, wow. Just the detail on the shoe.
Oh, no, but also that baseball just becomes a tube.
Oh, wow. I didn't
never do that even today. Yeah, it's so obsessively brilliant that just everything you do. And I'm assuming this is all common in the whole baseball manga genre. But how they came up with that is just, again, it's too much for me. It's still something that blows my mind, just how good that comic is.
I feel like even the most manga-inspired artists that Western comics have, like, Joe Madureira, Humberto Ramos, like, even they don't do that kind of distortion. But I do see the influence on you when it comes to the architecture and stuff, because that's really the thing that's really one of the things that really gets me about your work. There's a huge spread that I keep talking about in Top 10 A to Z.
Yeah.
Where you just draw the entire city of Neapolis. How long does it take you to draw something like that?
Oh, back then, there's an, I think it's let's see, the overview, the issue 7, I think, of Top 10, where I just have a single page where you look straight down the city and it looks like a scene from this manga.
Yeah.
That took 4 days. And that happened because Alan Moore got sick. He couldn't think of what the plot was going to be for the next issue. So he sat down to write 2 pages and decided the second page was the one to slow me down. First page, character waking up in the morning, getting ready to go to her job as a cop. Second page, incredibly difficult scene of a city that's a super Manhattan piled on top of several other super Manhattans, and then looking straight down, so there's no open sky or something like that I could draw. And I could draw faster than I do now, so it took 4 days, and by then he was over his cold and I had to figure out what the plot was.
All right, we'll get back to that later, because I want to get back to 1994 when you won the Russ Manning Award for the most promising newcomer. So I called you a 5-time Eisner Award winner, but that award is actually given out at the Eisner. So technically you've received Eisner Awards 5 times. I mean, awards at the Eisners 5 times.
Yeah.
How'd that feel, and how much confidence did that give you moving forward?
I wouldn't call it confidence. Okay, so I won the Russ. Yeah, pressure. It's it was your dad putting his hand on your shoulder saying, "Don't embarrass me." Good luck.
Spoken like a true Asian.
Yeah. It was like, yeah, you're really promising. Yeah, don't make us into idiots. And so, but yeah,
you've got an A now. You can't get a B.
Oh no. Yeah, it was like the start of the semester and someone saying, "Oh, we think you're going to be an A student this year."
Oh no.
On a new course. And it's just like, okay. And then your dad says, "Don't embarrass me. Your teacher said you're going to get an A." But yeah, I didn't even know the Russ Manning Award existed when it arrived in the mail from DC's offices, and they had explained what it was, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, I better draw harder.
Oh, so you weren't even at the ceremony?
Oh no, I'd heard of San Diego Comic-Con, but it would be several years until I actually made it there.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
that's interesting. Then you were actually nominated again before you won another Eisner. You were nominated again for best artist, I think, or best penciler inker team. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
for Starman number 46 in 1999. It was the one with the Jester and Bobo Benetti.
Oh yeah,
and it's actually technically your second Starman issue, because you launched the Shade. But that was the time when I first saw you drew this whole spread of Opal City in that marvelous technically architectural fashion. And how'd that
Yeah.
feel? How'd that go?
Um, I mean, I love Art Deco architecture. I loved, all of a sudden, my brain's fart. Like, I'm horrible with names again. The main artist on Starman, there's James
Tony
Robinson
Harris.
writing, and Tony Harris, who's a friend of
Yeah.
mine, because I'm horrible with names. Yeah, Tony, I love Tony Harris's art. So I just wanted to do justice to that. I also believe that in a, in a certain type of story, well, in a story where the world doesn't look like the world that your readers live in every day exactly,
Mm-hmm.
you have to put in more detail to show why it doesn't look like their world. And therefore, if I kind of just, well, if I threw in the standard, draw a bunch of straight lines at right angles to represent buildings, that's not Opal. And if I really want to show why Opal's this amazing place to live, I have to put in the details and put in the work to show how beautiful Art Deco architecture is. And every time I do a story set in a place in a setting like that that's different than our world, or in some way distinctive from our world, yeah, you have to throw in the backgrounds.
And you also employ in there that that ink wash technique, or was it called ink wash?
No, it wasn't ink wash yet.
It wasn't.
Okay, no. Okay, so the thing is, American comics went from kind of very, very bad printing and very bad reproduction in the 70s to the 80s, to then in the 90s suddenly having access to Photoshop, but not a lot of artists who were artists trained in Photoshop. There are good color artists, and then there were people trained in Photoshop in the 90s, and they didn't always coincide. So it was the dark ages of American comic book coloring. So first I had the trouble of being a bit like the Gene Colan problem I was talking about earlier. I had all these, coming out of art school, I loved charcoal. And I had all these grayscale, subtle shading things in my head that I just loved. I just adored the way, when I looked at reference photographs, like if the viewers out there can look at the screen image of Glee, and you'll see the subtleties of how there's like off-white highlights and stuff like that, the very bright white highlights on his cheek and his nose and stuff like that. Kind of a medium value going across the middle of his forehead and stuff like that, and then some darker shadows on the far side of his face. And all these things are really interesting. I love the subtleties of human faces and stuff like that. And I wanted to capture it, and it's hard to do that really well, unless you're Bill Sienkiewicz, using 70s, 80s comics technology. And then the other problem happened that because we were also in the dark, and when I got in, it was the dark ages of American comic book coloring. They would try to replicate, replicate the shading of my pencil draw. Well, so I have to get that across through the inker. The inker doesn't always get the point of what I'm trying to do. Then after that, the colorist doesn't always get what the inker and the penciler are trying to do. And especially in the 90s, when the quality of coloring went really downhill because there were too many options, they didn't know how to use them, it got really painful. So
That was when computer generated coloring was coming in, and then people were just like, how do I use computers, right?
Yeah, how do I do this? Yeah, oh, I know it's going to look really cool for radiation effect. I'm going to do this kind of multicolor chromatic filter that looks like an oil spill that puts every color in blobs, and that'll look like energy. And it's like, no, it doesn't. It looks like a hippie threw up. It looks like a hippie took too many mushrooms, and he just vomited on your page, man. So at that point, I thought I was going to create shading guides for the colors to make their coloring guide to show what I intended for it, because I had this problem where I was trying to do more and more cross hatching, and then the colorist would not understand what my cross hatching was and would do bad colors on top of it that didn't work with it. So instead of doing all the cross hatching, I made a shading guide, and I did it in warm and cool grays because I didn't want to do a full coloring guide because I really like coloring too, and I didn't have time to get the color just right and still meet a deadline. And it was Archie Goodwin and the worst person with names, and his assistant, who said, these coloring guides in warm and cool grays look really good as is. Can we just print it like this? And I said, I didn't think it was printable. I like how they look, but yeah, let's do it. And they did it. And that was their call, which I didn't think would work. And they did it, and it worked great. Oh, man. Oh, can I also go back on a different thing? Which by the time I broke in, it was accepted that my assistant editor with Archie Goodwin and he's
Yeah.
going to kill me if he sees this interview because I know him and he's a really good friend of mine. He's Asian American too. And
Yeah, I'm
because
just
of
gonna
the
put a little thing here as a text edit when when this goes up.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because the Filipino artists made Asians look like a regular part of American comic book art, which allowed people like Jim Lee to get in. And then Jim Lee became the biggest star in comics by the time I broke in.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I come in, it's like it's just very, very accepted that Asian American men can draw comics. So it's just completely accepted. I was just part of the club. And if you talk to people who aren't white or Asian trying to do comic book art and male, their trip was a lot harder. Asian American women, they have horror stories. But I mean, for me, I am really, really grateful to the pioneers who broke in. It made my life easier, and just doing my part to make the next trailblazer's life a little easier for the other people trying to get it, who are really brilliant and talented.
Yay for Filipinos.
Yeah,
Woohoo! Okay.
you saved my bacon.
And also in 1999, you started working on Top 10 with Alan Moore, and I've always wanted to hear this story because I've kind of heard how everyone else got their stint on the ABC books. There's a whole back issue magazine with Alan and Chris Sprouse, Kevin O'Neill, J.H. Williams. You're not in it for some reason, so your story isn't in there. I've heard that Alan took what was his line at Awesome Comics and just kind of wanted to bring it over to Wildstorm with different titles. But I know the guy working on his team book back then was Steve Scrose. So how did you get involved in ABC and Top 10?
Okay, so ever since Miracle Man and Top 10, I was a huge fan of Alan Moore. Oh, not Top 10. Miracle Man and Watchmen. I was a huge fan of Alan Moore. Right. So as a teenager, growing up and reading that, I was just those things blew me away. Swamp Thing also. So after I broke in, I became friends with Alex Ross, who's doing covers for Alan Moore's Awesome books. And at one point I was talking to him on the phone. I said, I'm so jealous that you get, even though it's only covers, you're not doing stories. I'm so jealous you get to work with Alan Moore. And he said, well, Gene, if you really want the project, why don't you just try to get it? And it's like, you know what? I really need to just try to get an Alan Moore story. So I contacted the people at Awesome Comics, and they liked my work. And they began trying to set it up so that I could do one of the stories someday. And then they folded.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they came back later in another form with a slightly different name for the company, but the same people and the same characters.
Yeah.
But yeah, it all collapsed before I could actually get a chance to do it. At which point, Alan Moore then, as you mentioned, migrated his basic concepts and a lot of his creative teams over to Wildstorm, which was owned by Jim Lee, a part of Image. And at that point, following Alex Ross's advice, I contacted an editor saying, hey, I would really love to work on an Alan Moore story. And Scott Dunbar knew who I was, knew my work, and said, oh, I'd love to work with you too. But that all depends on Alan. Can you send me a big, some type of a portfolio of your work, which I can forward to Alan and see if he likes it? And it turned out Alan liked it, and that's how I got on board.
And you knew this question was coming because I would be remiss in not asking this question. Yes. What's it like to work with Alan Moore?
Hold on a second. Alan is working with Alan is just delightful. At the time, I don't know if he's changed. Well, he barely does any comics now, but at the time, he mostly worked through fax machine. So he didn't. Yeah, and even then it was unusual. He would type everything up on I think it was one of those typewriters, which they probably don't manufacture anymore. It had a single line of LCD screen where you could type out one line of text, and after you finish that, you would then type it onto a piece of paper, and then you do the next line.
Oh, so it was one of those machines. I remember those.
Yeah. Yeah, and then he would take those, send them through a transatlantic fax, and send it off to Wildstorm, and then they would have to kind of reformat it and then send it off to me. But just this multiple generations of just like Alan Moore loving to play with the concept of artificial intelligence in the internet, but not wanting in his house a allowing internet demons or something to get into his, mystical ritual items or something like that. So
Yeah, I've noticed
yeah.
recently his daughters have been, sometimes posting videos of him or talking about him on their social media. And I'm like, what's stopping him from just getting on it?
Oh man.
Yeah.
I'm going to say if he's happy without it, I mean, I know it wastes a lot of my time. So,
It
but also I should mention,
it
he's a
makes
great
this
collaborator.
possible. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, okay. Alan had a really bad experience coming to America when he first broke into American comics,
Mhm.
where two things happened. The fans were rabid, and they would chase him down hallways of hotel rooms and stuff like that when he just wanted a little quiet time.
Mhm.
And then he met a lot of people like Hollywood producers who would ask him advice like, "Oh, I'm doing this Batman movie. Do you have any advice on what I should do with it?" Maybe. Oh, thank you for the sandwich. Thank you for the beer. Here's exactly what the Batman movie should look like. And then he realized afterwards, oh, I got paid one beer and one large sandwich to fix the Batman movie, and that's all I ever got out of it. And he's kind of like, I do not want to repeat these experiences. So he avoids coming to the United States. I don't think he has since the 90s or maybe even the late 80s. He avoids Americans in general, which, I mean, for some reason, he thinks we're kind of crazy and stupid. I said during the COVID
No.
pandemic. Yeah, we're rich, but yeah, we're kind of crazy and stupid. So, yeah, but so yeah, he does. So I guess one thing to say is, I mean, avoiding the internet is probably a pretty good way to avoid Americans. Um,
It's true.
but also, okay, yeah. So the other thing is, yeah, but when I was working with him, we talked on the phone, we sent faxes back and forth and stuff like that, or actual FedEx packages from Minnesota to the United Kingdom, paid for by DC Comics, which was crazy expensive. But no emails or anything like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
He
how heavy
was
were those phone bills?
They were pretty bad back then. Yeah, this is before things like Skype or Zoom or things like that.
Yeah.
You just had to get used to like a $80, $100, $150 phone bill. Let me see, and also yeah, even before cell phones were really common. But I mean, he was really chatty, and he was also the fastest creative mind I've ever worked with. Where
Really?
yeah, if every other person pretty much I've ever like traded ideas back and forth with, I'm able to keep up or even outpace them, except Alan Moore. And there got to be this embarrassing thing where he'd say, "You have any ideas for what we should do in the next issue? Anything you'd like, not even have to be a whole plot, just things you want me to throw in." And I'd throw something at him, and there'd be this silence as we both realized, "Oh, I just swiped something from an old Alan Moore comic book, and he probably doesn't want to write that again." So and then an example of one of the exchanges, this one really stuck in my mind, was where he actually liked it, which didn't happen very often. So he's like, I said, what would be really funny is, so you have Superman who has like, super strength and super breath and all that. If he gets really drunk, does he have super vomit? I mean, does that like just punch through a wall? And I thought this was hilarious, drunk Superman. And then he began going, oh, that's good. That's good. Oh, it'll be even funnier if it's not Superman, if it's Godzilla and the vomit's radioactive. And he just began spinning it out and spinning it out. And it's like, I cannot add anything to this conversation, but man, this is really fun to listen to, Alan Moore.
It was fun to
So,
read too.
oh yeah, it's so good. But yeah, he just fastest mind I've ever worked with creatively. Just so fast.
That's a compliment because
Oh,
you've worked with a lot of creative minds.
oh yeah, yeah. He's the only writer I know of who doesn't do second drafts in any medium.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, he just types it out, sends out 2 pages, may not even know what the rest of the plot's going, types out another 3 pages when he realizes he finished those pages. Suddenly the next day you have more pages, and just like no second draft. I mean, you can't second draft it because he's just writing it as I needed the pages.
Oh, well, that's I'm speechless. But moving
Yeah.
on to somebody else who you worked with in Top 10, this person means a lot to you. What's your relationship like with Xander Cannon?
Oh, wow. Xander Cannon is he is okay. He wasn't born in Minnesota, but if you know anything about the Minnesota stereotype of Minnesota nice, he is the Minnesota nicest guy you'll meet.
Okay.
Just very sharing, caring, nice, cheerful guy, very chipper, super creative. If anyone out there has not read, if you love if you love Japanese monster movies and kaiju, track down his Kaiju Max. And it is just this brilliant riff where he thought originally it was going to be a comedy sitcom book about a monster prison island.
Hmm.
And he realized really quickly, oh, actually the issues they're dealing with are really serious, like being separated from your kids, uh, you know, brutality, frankly, rape and stuff like that, but handled in a really serious manner. And it's just, it it is the natural successor book to anyone who loved Top 10. You should be reading Kaiju Max next. There's like 4 volumes out, and they're all brilliant. But here's the thing about Xander. His vision is so particular and also so adaptive to as he's going along. I also have trouble collaborating with him because I can't understand what he's going for. And it's the tone of Kaiju Max is so exquisite and so beautiful. There's no way I could have helped him with that. He told me also about like another book he did called Heck, which is about traveling to hell. And I kind of thought, oh, well, this sounds kind of action adventure-y. And it turned out he was actually kind of doing existential horror.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't get that from his tone, but he was putting so many action adventure tropes into it. I thought he was going for the action adventure fun. And no, he was using action adventure tropes to tell a story about a man battling with his own soul and guilt and self-loathing. And yeah, so when I shot ideas at him, it was kind of like, he couldn't explain. That's another thing. He sometimes will just, I think he gets a little flustered around me. He couldn't explain, Gene, I'm using action adventure tropes, but this is not an action adventure story. And if you can track down Heck 2, it is a beautiful story. And it's just, yeah, he's a brilliant guy. What I usually do when I am working with him is he will do story layouts.
Mm-hmm.
And he does those, like, he can just like do like a whole book's worth of layouts, like 22 pages of layouts with lettering and everything laid out perfectly in the like 1 day or 2 days. Well, for me, that would take several days of struggling and stuff like that. And once he does it, I change some of the compositions because, as you know, for my backgrounds, I think really 3-dimensionally, and everything's laid out 3D. Even if I'm doing it smudgy or just sketching it in, there's a 3D, a 3D world behind everyone.
Yeah, you know where everything goes.
Yeah, but his storytelling's so good. I keep the word balloons in the same place. I keep the head in the same place, and then I might rotate the camera completely different than what he's doing, but it still works. And everything flows because of the placement, the 2D placement of everything he does. I translate it to 3D, but I keep the 2D elements, and he's so good at that. Which again, you can see if you track down Heck or Kaiju Max.
I did notice that in Top 10 when you just have people walking and talking and then you just move the camera around a lot. It's actually one of the comics that I say that I've given to people who have never read comics before because they realize like it moves so fluidly for them, but also because of the Easter eggs, because they realize they actually have to look at the art. They can't just read the words. So having said that, my last question about Top 10 is what is your favorite sequence in it? And I feel like I know what the answer is going to be. But I want to.
Oh man,
yeah.
This is gonna be cheap. It's probably not gonna be what you're thinking. It's the one where Shock-Headed Peter.
Okay.
Is talking about saying to Joe Pie's face how much he hates Joe Pie, and then Shock-Headed Peter goes to a vending machine to get some candy.
I love that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's just a cheap little joke I put in there where Joe Pie says, as he's reaching into the slot at the bottom of the vending machine to grab a candy bar, Joe Pie says, "Stop molesting my cousin." And I cut off the lettering, so instead of saying push, it says puss.
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, I did a lot of things like that all the time where it wasn't just the Easter eggs, but just little subtle things all the time are always kind of building up the meaning of things. Oh man, I don't know.
For the record, for whoever is curious what I was thinking of, I thought you were going to talk about the cats.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's actually something else where like Xander Cannon, because he's so good at storytelling. I was actually kind of trying to figure out, I'm doing cartoon mice, superheroes. Should I make them a little cartoony? And it was Xander who said, oh, no. The joke is they're realistic. You have to keep them realistic. So Xander Cannon is, again, the hero of Top 10 that nobody realizes he's the hero.
And in 2002, you got your first published writing gig with a story for Iron Fist. What got the writing bug to to bite you?
Well, I especially after working with Xander, who's a writer who wrote his own comics before he ever worked with me. He started off writing, drawing, everything, graphic design. I thought, oh, I've worked with a lot of writers. I think I understand how they work. I bet I could write a good story. And then I was offered a story by Stuart Moore at Marvel, and he said he'd let me pick my writer. I'm not going to name him right now, but I picked a writer I'd always wanted to work with but hadn't yet. And then we were assigned Iron Fist, and I waited for the script and waited for the script. And as the deadline began approaching, the editor called me and said, the writer has stopped answering emails on the phone. And somebody needs to write this story, and you're the only person left. So Stuart Moore had to coach me through 4 different drafts of the story and just critiquing it until it got into a shape where he felt comfortable publishing it. And that's how I ended up with my first writing gig, 12-page story for Iron Fist. And that was one of the great learning experiences I've ever had inside of comics. The biggest learning experience was working with Archie Goodwin, where he explained his script to me and how I should be doing doing the visual side of it to make the story work, where I was trying to be frankly, a little bit too Jim Lee, action, adventure, everything looks cool. And he's like, no, build the suspense. And this is where you pour on the gas. It's the scene that needs the gas, but hold off until you get there. Build suspense. The next big learning experience was Xander Cannon, where because he'd gone through every step of the process, making his own comics, he was able to explain to me what Alan Moore was doing in the scripts. And he was able to see things I did not see.
Really?
Like the mice. Yeah. Or also
Okay.
just, there's a simple, if you ever get a chance to look at an Alan Moore script and then compare it to the comic, you'll see that Alan Moore will describe the layouts in every panel, and usually foreground to background, left to right. And that's probably because he draws a rough. This is Xander's analysis of Alan Moore, and then types the script based on his rough, like his rough sketch, and then throws away the rough and never shows it to you to give you creative freedom. But if you do exactly the recipe in the comic, laying out the heads in the order they're doing, it will work. And the order of the heads is always the order that they speak. So that way you don't have word balloons with tails crossing.
Mm-hmm.
Or you don't have tails crossing multiple times, which is like a real peeve of mine in comics.
So he's already worked it out before you even get it.
Yeah, he knows it can work elegantly if you follow his directions. And if you have a different idea and do that, Alan Moore gives you that freedom.
Because you're the artist.
Next great learning experience is work. Yeah, which not every writer, I'm not going to name names, but not every writer understands this, especially insecure ones. That unless you get a really bad artist and you can't afford a better one, or it's not your choice, trust your artist, get someone you like, and then trust them. And if you have to, explain what you have to, but don't over-explain stuff. But yeah, Stuart Moore is then the next great one who had taught me how to write a comic book, and draft after draft after draft after draft. I'm going to say, in general, comic book editors nowadays don't have the time to coach writers and artists the way that they did back then. That was kind of the end of the era around that. Where nowadays they're always in meetings. I don't know why they have to have more meetings than they did then, but that's what it's like for them now.
You won 2 Eisner Awards for Top 10 and 1 more for the 49ers, and you were actually also nominated for the 49ers. And then your 4th Eisner Award came in 2008 with a Justice League of America issue with Brad Meltzer. It was called Walls. What can you tell us about that experience? Because that was a trip to read.
Oh, yeah. So the visual storytelling inside of Walls is Vixen and Red Arrow trapped in a building that has collapsed and fallen into a river. So they're trapped between collapsed walls and floors of a building that are pressing down on them. There's no light, and it's starting to flood.
Mm-hmm.
And the building's also settling, so it's collapsing tighter and tighter. And what Brad Meltzer asked me to do is to make the gutters between all the images black, and to make the gutters get thicker and thicker and thicker as the story went along. And I actually objected to this, saying, but wait a minute, there's barely going to be any drawing on the last pages, before they actually escape. And I kind of felt guilty. I was like, well, shouldn't I be doing more work? And he's like, Gene, you're just going to have to trust me on this. And he was right. and it worked beautifully. Just like it felt very claustrophobic as you get in, and like suddenly the panels go from, you know, as big as they can be to giant black gap, and then this sliver where you see two people being crushed to death and drowning. And it was just, yeah.
That's actually what I was going to say, because your art is not on all the pages. But your pacing is there, right? Because
Yeah.
of all the gutters.
Yeah, I mean, there's less of my art on every page, just my art on every page, but less of it. And I'm going to say the 3 or 4 pages before they escape were some of the easiest to draw comics pages I've ever drawn in my life, because there's barely anything on the page. It was also kind of the high point of my ink wash style, where I kind of took control of everything. And before I decided I need to actually just go digital at this point.
Okay. And then, you know, you had a few projects since, and then in 2015 you launched May,
Yes.
which was originally from Dark Horse, then it went over to Lion Forge. I want to ask, what were you inspired by to create May?
Oh,
I actually have it
well,
here beside me right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's a copy of the Dark Horse edition. So yeah.
The covers are different. I have the Lion Forge edition.
That's Lion Forge edition. Yeah. So part of it was there's a thing where like I feel like comics has always been, every year I've been in the comic book industry, every year is like a crisis, like a comic book annual crisis event at DC Comics or Marvel Comics, like Infinite Crisis or Secret Wars or something like that, or Secret Wars 3 or whatever they're calling it nowadays. And it always feels like every year the comic book industry is ready to collapse. It'll be gone for the American comic book industry.
Yeah.
Will just be gone forever. Where like we had like the Marvel bankruptcy in the 90s, and then selling weight collector booms, which were obviously going to become busts, and just so many stupid things. And then of course this year we have the COVID-19 pandemic, which caused American comic book stores to just close for 2 months. So every year it seems we go through something stupid. And the long-term problem for American comics is that we kept on focusing on selling comics to adults and not wanting to sell comics to kids.
Mm-hmm.
So I did want to make a book for kids that adults could still enjoy. I also, I mean, you know a decent number of about manga, right? I mean, you actually read Japanese, so I'm assuming you actually.
No, I mean, I can read
Okay.
Some Japanese, but I don't read it enough to have a reading comprehension of it.
Oh, okay.
But yeah.
I've
read some manga. Manga's long. Manga's a commitment.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You can't buy one without buying like 250 other books.
There's a reason why a successful manga strip will have like 5-6 more artists working on it, because they're churning out the pages. There's nothing inherent about comics, like as manga shows, that means women don't enjoy reading comics. But in American comics, there's assumptions. So I wanted to do something with a female hero. And also at the time in American pop culture, there were very, very few female geek main characters. It's gotten better since. But at the time, I was like looking around, and if there was a female geek character, and it was the main character of anything, like a movie, especially like a rom-com movie, the usual character arc for the character was they're awkward, they're uncomfortable around boys, and then a boy comes up to them and says, "Oh, now that I've seen you without your glasses, I realize you're beautiful and you're not a geek."
She's all that.
Girl says, "Yeah," and then the girl says, "Oh, thank God I don't have to be a geek anymore. Yes, now I will be the cool kid and leave behind all my geeky stuff." And I was kind of like, no, I want to do a story where the geek girl is a hero because she's a geek, and she stays a geek, and she's proud of being a geek, because I have a lot of friends who are female geeks, and I thought they deserved to be represented in the story and be a hero. And I like my friends, so I want to do a story about my friends. So that's what caused May. That's what made me invent May. And also it's that other thing, when especially when you create your first big creator-owned title or story of anything, you tend to jam in everything you love. So I threw in mad science, and I threw in like weird bits of history, and just everything I just wanted to draw and stuff like that. And I was raised in this American state of Indiana, and I just threw in some references to Indiana the things I love about Indiana, the things I hate about Indiana. So, just things I'm very passionate about.
So May is about, a girl named May Fortell, and she has a sister named Abby who comes back after years of being gone, and turns out she's been in the land of, and I am sure to mispronounce this because you did this on purpose, Simmer Terran.
Yeah, there's it's Czech is a really odd language. There's a TS sound at the start. So I'm going to get this a little bit wrong probably. Simultanean.
Oh, Simmer Terran. Okay.
Something like that. If you got a real
Trying.
Czech person, they can get right.
And
But if you just say Simultanean, that's close enough.
Simmer Terran. And Abby's the one who kind of has been there for a long time. But the story, the title character is May. So what led to making it so that who would usually be the sidekick in any other book, like
Right.
what made you decide that she was going to be the main character?
Yeah, initially I was going to have the older sister who'd gone to the fantasy world be the main character, and then, like you said, make the younger sister May the sidekick. And actually, there's a joke where if you put their names together, Annie May.
Oh wow, I did not. Okay, that's I didn't realize.
Annie May Fortell. Yeah. It becomes a sentence.
Yeah.
But what I realized is that the main character is or not the main character, the older sister, Annie Fortell, is a pure action hero, and part of what makes her entertaining is that she never admits she's wrong, or she doesn't want to admit she's wrong. She's kind of overconfident, and she thinks she can fix every problem by hitting it harder. Mm-hmm. Which, have I mentioned before that America is rich and stupid sometimes and crazy? And it's just, I've seen this so much both in Americans, real live Americans I know, and also in American foreign policy. And I think it's just nuts. So I want to do a character, and so there's nowhere for Annie to go to kind of develop that much. And there are only so many stories you can tell if she's the main character. So May became the main character because the smart backup character is actually the one who can solve things. I want to show how even inside an action story, you need to figure out what the real problem is before you try to solve it. And so often, both in American foreign policy and also with real Americans I know, they want to break everything down into, I need to identify somebody who's the bad guy, and then if I can just beat up the bad guy, the problem will go away.
I mean, like the virus.
Yeah, we're literally trying to say, okay, if we can just beat down the Chinese now, after the virus got here, the virus will go away, which is no, that doesn't happen. Or we can just prove Dr. Fauci, the main disease specialist inside the federal government, is evil and part of a conspiracy. The disease will go away if we can just get him fired or something like that. And it's no, none of that works. You cannot put a face on the virus and punch it and make the virus go away. But, again, that's why I want to do May as the main character. She's somebody who thinks things through and tries to figure out why things are really happening.
And speaking of thinking things through, this comic, especially May, is as you mentioned, it's a love letter to geek culture. Oh, yeah. And unlike other fantasy worlds that I've seen, you just kind of put everything in there, including, like you said, mad scientists side by side with fantasy stuff. And one thing that I did notice in all of that is a really conscious push for diversity. So not only do you have May and Annie who are females, you even have a sequence where you make it clear that this place was founded by African Americans, and the first person who found the portal was a Czech. And then they have a little exchange about how all these fantasy fiction just have white people in them, and then they talk about how ridiculous that is.
Yeah, well, let me just say that. Okay, so I wanted to put African Americans in, partially for diversity, and just because it was fun to draw, and also because it gave me a lot of story options, stuff like that. But also, I also did a check because I didn't want to do the stereotypical German fantasy names that sound like heavy metal bands, or English, which to me sounds like really annoying American subdivisions with golf courses built into them. So like Foxcross or something. If you go through any name inside of the Game of Thrones, almost, most of them make me think, oh, that sounds like a street I grew up on, because I grew up in a subdivision next to a golf course. oh, Foxcross, the Foxcross family, blah blah blah, and it's just like, oh. Okay, so
It's been done.
yeah,
Yeah.
so partially I went with the Czech language as the other people to colonize that world because Czech looks cool, but also I feel a lot of empathy for the Slavic peoples because I kind of feel like the crisis they've been through, well, the non-Russian Slavic peoples, because the problem they've had to deal with for centuries is they're trapped between two great empires. So they're between the Germans, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Russians, and then they'll do some. The other Slavic peoples will do something great in between, and then one side or the other, or in a conspiracy together, the Russians and Germans will decide, oh, let's crush them again. And being, I'm Korean, so being between China and Japan kind of gave me a lot of empathy for Central Europe.
I mean, we've got disputed lands with China, so I feel you.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
So,
You'd think you'd be in a safe spot, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the Philippines is weirdly between China and the United States, and it's
we're
yeah.
strategic position.
Yeah, yeah, you got to surf between the two and not get crushed. Yeah, but then Simmerterren. Okay. Anyway, Simmerterren is this place where these people who had been oppressed by these incredibly powerful, rich empires, African Americans and the Czechs and Czech Americans, discovered a path into and colonized and realized, oh, if we tell either of our governments, they will take it away from us. Because at the time when the Czechs came over, they were still part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So they can't tell the government about it. And the African Americans are like, wow, here's a place without segregation and lynching. Yeah, we're never going to tell the American government about this place.
And I don't think you've gotten to the point in the story where you actually explain all that yet. So that's actually bonus material for our readers.
Oh yeah, it's
just
something where like
background stuff.
it's one of those. Yeah, it's background stuff where I can kind of, if people want to know more about it, I'll tell them about it, but it doesn't directly relate to the story because it is going to the past. I will say this. See, this is something where like one of the things I love about Star Wars is they don't the first Star Wars movie, Episode 4, they don't over-explain everything. So they mentioned that there's a Galactic Senate, which the Emperor has done away with, has dissolved. But they never show you a scene inside the Galactic Senate because that would be boring. And then later, George Lucas got to do Episode 1, and he decided, you know what would be really fun? If we can spend 10 minutes in the next few movies, or 15-minute sequences in the next few movies, in the Galactic Senate every time. And it kills the movie. It just destroys every bit of momentum. You could have just had somebody hearing afterwards, oh, what happened to the Galactic Senate? Oh, they made this decision. But no, the committee meetings. Nobody needs a committee meeting in an action movie. Unless it's, oh, God, yeah. It never works. I have never seen it work. James Bond movie. There's a committee meeting in a James Bond movie, and it's awful. And they even break it up with a gunfight, and it just makes everything stupider.
It's pointless because you know it's going to get interrupted.
Yeah, it's yeah. Oh God. Yeah, it's bad.
When you so this is a love letter to geek culture, but I also notice it is a commentary on geek culture because May and her friend Dahlia are geek girls, and that comes with it a lot of gatekeeping.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of the inspiration was also just again, like I said, I have a lot of female geek friends who are just really great geeks. Own comic shops, run comic shops, create comics, and stuff like that. But I wanted to, I wanted to kind of show a little bit of their lives, and also a lot of young readers who are comic book fans who are female, who at the time especially didn't have a lot of female representation. And again, it has gotten a lot better in the last few years since I first started in May. So a lot of the little details of what May loves are not things necessarily that I'm personally a fan of, but it's things that my friends are fans of because I wanted to build up a life that made sense for who she is as a young woman. And I am not a young woman. I'm 50 years old. In a few weeks, I'm going to be 51. So yeah, I wanted to be present. I didn't want it to be a kid who's really into the comics of the 80s and doesn't understand manga or something like that, or video games. Again, I don't actually play video games because around 2002, I started playing Unreal Tournament.
Okay.
And I couldn't stop for 3 days. and I realized I
Oh,
was going to lose my job if I kept it up, so I went cold turkey.
you knew. It's a bad investment for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to name names, but there are actual comic book artists who destroyed their careers by playing video games, and I knew that would destroy me if I kept it up.
I feel like there are certain names I could guess, but I'm not gonna do it here.
Yeah.
Um, and you've had a couple of guest writers on, Mark Waid and Molly Jane Kramer, and I do notice that some characters' last names are Kramer. So,
Oh yeah. If you go, do I have volume 2 here? I actually sold my last copy of volume 2, but if you get volume 2 from Lion Forge of May, there's a small section where Molly Jane Kramer, the writer, sits and shares a meal with Dahlia Jane Kramer, the character, and explains the comic book to her,
okay.
and it's just a lot of fun. Um, so with Mark Waid, it was just he needed something from me. He wanted a drawing from me, and I said, well, you know what? I'll trade you drawing that story for you if you'll write a story for me. And it's just like, I'm such a huge Mark Waid fan. Of course, I was going to try to go for that. And he's so good at writing serial fiction. It really just expanded out the world, where I threw an idea of what the story would be, and he was like, no, it was actually going to be a story about Annie. I threw an idea. Can you write a story about what Annie's doing while everything else is going on? And he began looking at the situation, saying, can I do the story about May instead? Because I think it's more interesting showing what she's doing during this time. And it's like, you're you're Mark Waid. Yes, please do it. And it came out brilliant. And then the other thing is, for the Molly Jane story that she wrote, I wasn't originally planning on having her write it, but it turned out the character I based on my friend, Dahlia Jane Kramer, goes to Purdue University inside of Indiana. And then when I was talking to Molly Jane, it turned out I found out she went to Purdue University, which was just way too much of a coincidence. So, like I said, I mined my friends' lives to kind of round out my characters for stuff I wouldn't know about personally. So I began asking about what her life was like when she was young, being a geek girl at Purdue University. And it became this point where, I realized I was not writing the issue anymore. I was transcribing the story she was describing to me. And at that point, I
Oh,
just said, it
so
was
you
just
just
like
gave
I
her
was
writing
putting so
credit.
many. Yeah, it was. Yeah, no, I mean, it wasn't writing credit. It was just like wasn't writing a script. I was just writing out a plot, and it was just like, Molly, I mean, I'm just taking all these ideas and actual incidents from you, and then fictional ideas you're coming up with based on your real life to round out this story. Will you just write it, because it's your story now? I mean, this is just obviously your story. And yeah, she knew exactly what she wanted to do with it. And I had to help her translate it into comics form because she hadn't actually written a script before. But yeah, it's a story I could not have written.
So it's her first writing credit.
Oh yeah.
You gave
And
her
then
her
her
first writing
next
credit.
writing,
It's cool.
yeah. Oh, also this. In the next issue, she gets a partial writing credit because it turns out I am I'm a heterosexual guy, but I'm very specifically very gynophilic. I'm somebody who thinks women are sexy and attractive, but I just deep down don't understand why women find men attractive or why gay men find men attractive. I just do not see it.
I'm
So
with you there.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. So in the sequence where I was writing May meeting with her boyfriend again after having been away in had been away in a fantasy world for a few months. The initial write through I did of it made him really boring and unattractive to women. And at that point, I was like, "Hey, Molly Jane, can you help me with this bit of the story?" And
Yeah.
she made him into sexy, which I couldn't do. It's kind of like I do not understand how to write a sexy guy.
It's just it goes against our societal training. Or it might
Yeah,
be genetic, I don't know.
yeah. I mean, I know the things that are supposed to be sexy, but I don't know how to play with it. And Molly Jane was really able to play with it.
Yeah, sometimes my friends, my female friends, would say like some guy is sexy, and sometimes I get it, like Chris Hemsworth, and then
Yeah.
sometimes they'd say somebody else, like sorry, like Benedict Cumberbatch, and I'm like, what? But he's like as thin as a plank of wood.
Yeah. He
so I'm
looks
not
good.
sure.
He looks good in expensive clothes. That's a good way to put that for him.
Hmm.
He's like a clothes hanger with a little head on top. He's a pretty clothes hanger with a head on top. And
It's like a
but
store
okay, well, the other thing
mannequin.
is, yeah,
Yeah.
there's another thing. Where, okay, like take the Twilight novels. This is like the ultimate case of me not understanding what's sexy. I find the main character of that just a complete douchebag.
I,
I find nothing sexy about him. And the guys I've known in real life who are like Edward Cullen, I've had conversations with these guys. I know these guys, and they're not deep and complex inside. They're just douchebags. They're just horrible people inside.
it's all just
But
posturing.
right, and it's like, yeah, pretending I have this inner pain, and maybe they have an inner pain, but it's because they're idiots who are feel entitled and are jerks. I have met these guys. So yeah, so
I know what you
it's
mean.
hard for me. Yeah. So and and there's someone in my life. I've had someone who've had crushes on me, but it's not because I know what I'm doing.
Now that the latest issue of May has them returning to Simmerterren, and Dahlia is actually with them now. And so, what's on the horizon for that, for
Oh,
future issues, and when are they coming?
it's going to be a long delay on that because I was offered a very long graphic novel, like a 64-page graphic novel by a writer I've always wanted to work with from DC Comics, on a character I've never done a long story on with before. And
I
I'm
feel
working on it
like you're
right
not
now.
allowed to talk about this yet
Yeah,
because
I
you're
have not been
avoiding
announced.
names.
I've not
Yeah.
been announced on it. Yeah. But it will be really amazing. And it's if you look at the sequence where Molly Jane Kramer is talking to Dolly Jane Kramer at the back of May,
Mm-hmm.
it's that technique kind of amped up 1,000 times. It's this duotone technique with black lines and then a brownish color usually underneath, which goes from pure white to kind of a very dark brown. So it's kind of the technique, the style I used on Starman, but just pushed to another level. And then the writer asking the most ambitious things I've ever thought of, just like use use a cosmic being and feathers to represent millennia of injustice, and it's that big. And I know what the writer's getting at, but there's no easy answer to do exactly the right. It's incredibly ambitious, and the writer is pushing me really hard to do things I've never done before. It's going to be incredible, but I just can't talk about it yet.
Cosmic being with feathers. Okay. I'm going to try to figure out who this is, but I'm not gonna.
I will just say
And
that
I'm
it's
not
not
gonna
Neil
do it
Gaiman.
here.
Yeah, it's not Neil Gaiman. It's someone I'm as excited to work with as I would be to work with Neil Gaiman,
Okay.
and somebody who's doing something as ambitious as Sandman.
Oh wow. Hmm. Well, I can't wait to hear that news. What is the difference between working with another writer and working on a comic that you wrote yourself? It's just the biggest difference.
Oh, neurosis and insecurity. Okay, well, there's obviously freedom, but the problem with being a writer, and I've always known this is true, but you really get to experience it when you write a long story for yourself, is you can't tell if it's good. And when you're an artist, if you're at all onto the shelf and all you've gotten anywhere, you can tell if your drawing is working or if it's not working. And at the end of the day, you just look at that. At the end of the day, you go to sleep, you wake up in the morning, you look at it again, and you can see, oh, yeah, that worked. That looks good. Or, wow, I was really, really tired, and that looks horrible. I'm going to have to redraw that page. But if you're a writer and you're really pushing yourself, and you're not just doing something that's completely genre, predictable, that type of thing, going by that standard, you can't tell if it's really, really good, if it's really going to gut punch and really affect your readers in a way where they remember it for life. That's really hard. So I have a huge amount of respect for writers that way, of just like they're trying to do something they haven't done before and they're not sure if it's going to work. I'm going to say also, and I'm specifically talking about fiction writers.
Mhm.
And the thing is, everyone's a critic, literally. I mean, especially nowadays, everyone's doing their Yelp reviews or whatever, or the reviews of this and that, and they think they understand it. And even academics think, I understand how to write, and I understand why this piece of fiction is good, this piece of fiction is bad. But readers and critics and even academics all go through this very, very narrow lens. They don't look at the whole comic or the whole story. They look for the things they like. And when you're a fiction writer, you're going to have hopefully thousands, possibly millions of different people with slightly different viewpoints, all looking at your story and interpreting it in slightly different ways. And it has to work for enough of them so that it really gives them that emotional and maybe intellectual punch where it affects them. And making something durable enough and complex enough and interesting enough so that it works for all those people. Not everybody. You don't want to make a story that tries to please everybody, because that's going to be horrible and just porridge. But doing that is really complex. And when you're an artist or a critic or an academic doing that for the first time, it's kind of a shock of seeing how complex the task is of just writing a really great story. I'm also going to say, I'm going to apologize, because in America, porridge is oatmeal with maybe some brown sugar added on top of it. Anywhere with a good-sized Asian population eating rice and chicken is going to have much more delicious porridge. So I'm sorry I used the word porridge to describe something bland and uninteresting.
As we're closing off, what comic of yours do you think went under the radar that you wish people would have discovered more of?
My first great learning experience in comics. You can buy this actually really cheaply, except for shipping, to the Philippines, which is expensive. But if you can find this comic, it's cheap. Showcase 1995, issue 11, which has my story with Archie Goodwin, which is the one where you taught me how to do storytelling and how to do suspense and pacing. And it is one of the high points of my crosshatch style before I gave up on that and went to the ink wash style looking Starman style. And it's just this intricate stuff. If you've seen, of course, American Money with the intricate line work and shading and stuff like that, especially the classic builds as opposed to the new ones where they're not as good. The artists aren't as good. It's that level of cross-hatching and detail. So check it out. I had to stop because it was destroying my eyes and destroying my wrists, but I'm still very, very proud of the results.
Where do you think the industry is headed?
Well, okay, so the American graphic comic book industry is kind of two industries. So there's one that's focused on direct market comics, which go to comic shops, which focus on selling comics and toys. And then there's the bookstore market. And at this point, the comic shop market is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. Diamond now, just went through a giant trauma. All the American comic shops went through this giant trauma. The bookstore market is doing great. And the creators who are working on that are just reaching out to more and more kids.
Scholastic.
People of all race. Oh yeah, Scholastic, yeah. And Raina Telgemeier, stuff like that, creators like her, are just expanding the market out there. It's just really brilliant. So American comics, as a broad arts field, is doing great. Bookstore graphic novels in the United States are doing really great. It's one of the fastest growing. It's maybe the only growing section of the American book market, publishing market. American comic books are doing okay, but always, again, every year they go through a crisis where it looks like they might disappear forever. And I thought maybe after the New 52, maybe we're going to just expand for a few years. But that's not really true. We're still kind of working to fix it and save it from the idiots and the people who don't want new readers, why would you not want new readers? Why would you not want to introduce your kids and your friends and your girlfriend or your wife or whoever into comics? Because it's a great thing and it's just a joy to share. It's like not wanting to watch your favorite TV show with other people.
Comics have to grow old with me, Gene.
Yeah.
They should cater to me until I die.
Yeah. But yeah, this is what I've always felt and always wanted, just more. Yeah. I want everyone to love comics. I want everyone to have a chance to love comics.
And
make comics.
Exactly. So you're a big signal booster for diverse talent and actually just talent in general. You think we're going to get a bigger diversity of talent in the coming years?
Uh, in the broad American book market and comic market of graphic novels and comics, definitely. Will the comic shop market necessarily jump onto this successfully in time to actually save themselves? I hope so. I'm not sure.
Hmm.
But American comics, as a broad, graphic novels and comics field, will definitely expand and do better and better every year for a while.
Is it safe to say that the May is more successful in bookstores than in regular comic shops?
It does okay.
Yeah.
It's not the biggest comic in the world. Again, I mean, if you look like the Raina Telgemeier's and stuff like that, or I think I'm just going to talk about a friend of mine really quickly. So, if you can pick up Smile, brilliant comics. The Raina Telgemeier. This is the first graphic novel she did that she wrote and drew and everything.
Yeah.
Brilliant, honest memoir comic, which kids love. Also, Cleopatra in Space, which I think got released in Asia before it got released in the United States as a cartoon.
Hmm.
So an animated cartoon. And also the original graphic novels are just great too. Yeah, this stuff is just there's so many comics and just so many great books being put out right now. And I'm kind of excited that maybe at some point the Filipino creatives will actually start jumping into the American market because you understand it. I mean, you
Uh,
understand American culture in a way that sometimes not
yeah.
every country understands us.
I mean, you guys are hard to understand. Let's be honest. Wear a mask.
Well,
As we close off here, I want to say I just want to plug that if you get a commission from Gene Ha, he'll do it in Copic markers, and he will actually draw the character you request, but with your face on it. So
oh,
what leads
uh,
to that kind of decision when it comes to doing commissions?
okay.
That's a
So
trademark of yours.
I like giving free drawings to kids or just free drawings to people who really, really want a drawing but can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, of course, the bane of American comic book sketches at comic conventions are people who will take your drawing of Mary Jane Watson in a tight T-shirt and then immediately sell it on eBay after pleading, "Oh, I just want it because I'm a fan, or my mom's sick and she's a big fan of Mary Jane Watson in a tight, wet T-shirt. Can you please draw one for my mom?" Which is pretty close to a story that actually happened to Adam Hughes. So one of the ways I got around the eBay flippers was to say, what if I do a free drawing of you as your favorite character or superhero? Which makes it a lot harder to sell it on eBay.
And I'd love to like that would be great. Like if
Yeah.
I were a kid and you drew me as a I'm not trying to give you a hint here or anything, but that would be actually be great rather than just getting a regular drawing. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, kids really enjoy that. Though it's really funny when you have an adult who says they really just want a drawing for me, and I say, I'll draw you, and they're like, no, and then they walk away.
So it's a way to weed them out as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Gene. This has been a great talk.
Oh, it's been great talking to you, Dwayne, and also to everyone out there inside of Comics Cube Land.